here we are. Good afternoon and welcome to our weekly conversation here at Food for Sustainability. Today we will continue with our dialogue on sustainable proteins. And for today's menu, we bring you the Mediterranean diet. What is in fact a sustainable diet, here with an emphasis and a focus on legumes, and what is the role of bioactive peptides in healthy diets. So I hope you enjoy it and you stay with us until the end. I have the pleasure to have here with us Carla Santos. Carla is a specialist in plant nutrition and molecular biology. Fidel Toldra, a specialist in food and nutrition, and Karl Wolf, an anthropologist with a special interest on the Mediterranean diet. Today, hello, Karl. Today, we'll have Luís Martins as our moderator. Luís is from Food for Sustainability and is our specialist on biotechnology. And for those that don't know who I am, I'm Claudia. I am the coordinator of Food for Sustainability Academy, which is our educational hub where we disseminate knowledge and we try to build informed audience in the areas of our interest. As you probably know by now, we touch areas of circular economy, sustainable farming, ecosystem service, and functional nutrition towards more sustainable food systems in a view of more health and well-being. And of course, these webinars are indeed a joint effort by the Byproduct Valorization Team, which I briefly introduce. Daniela Fonseca, PhD in Sustainable Chemistry. Daniela, hello, are you there? Hello, Daniela. Rita Silva, microbiologist. Hello, Rita, give us a wave. Hi. And Silvia Moreira, PhD in Food Science. Hi, Silvia. Let me just remind you that these webinars are recorded, so if you do not wish to appear, please turn off your cameras. Questions are, of course, welcome. We will use Slido for this, but do not worry. If you type your questions here in the chat, we'll also direct them to our speakers. And speaking about Slido, I believe Sylvia has prepared a few questions to test your knowledge on today's topic. Sylvia, can you very quickly just share how our participants can join our small quiz? So please just type in www.slido.com and then just type in the code F4S Academy, okay? And while you're joining, let me just remind you that the core papers of these presentations are already available on our website. We'll post the link in the chat in a minute, but they are already all available. So, Sylvia, are we ready to test? Okay, so Sylvia has started with a difficult question. Who do you think was one of the first authors to note the presence of anti-nutrients? And we go back to, we started with ancient Greek, Pythagoras, or is it at the Renaissance time, Leonardo da Vinci, an Italian painter, or was it actually our only Portuguese Nobel Medicine Prize, Egas Muniz, which was awarded in the mid of the 20th century? So I haven't voted. Let me just vote here. So we have a tie. And all of a sudden more people came in, and I think we have a clear winner. So Egas Muniz was the first one to notice the presence of anti-nutrients. Carla will definitely let us know about it, but I think it was much, much earlier than that. Pythagoras had noted something about a particular type of legumes. Carla, was it fava beans, correct? So a long, long time ago, Pythagoras already pointed to these very interesting findings in terms of legumes. Okay, so we have learned something. Fantastic. Can we move to the next one? So, how do you perceive and how do anthropologists perceive the Mediterranean diet? Do you perceive it simply as a way of living, as part of geography, or with a bigger picture being a cultural model? What do you think? And this time we're not so split. Okay, so it seems that we are, the majority agrees that the Mediterranean diet is much more than just simply a diet. It becomes a cultural model. And Karl will delve more into this topic, but I guess that Karl's perspective also points to the wider view that we are in fact talking about a type of culture. Thank you so much. And finally, Fidel is going to talk us a little bit about dried cured hemp. Fidel has investigated dried cured hemp processes in Spain, Italy, and guess where else? Not in Portugal, in China. And the question now is, what type of health benefits are generated by this process, and the main reason why this health benefits exist is because they release peptides, proteins, or vitamins. So we have a clear view on peptides. So Fidel will surely clarify and explain how cured drying process is closely related with peptides. Thank you so much for voting. Thank you so much for taking part in this short quiz. So we are on our topic. Let me remind you that the Q&A tab is also now open. I invite you to type in your questions to our speakers, or simply to vote on a question that you wish to be addressed to one of our speakers. Silvia will be very attentive to the chat, and Luis will direct the questions to our speakers. So now I hand the session to Luis. Luis will introduce our distinguished speakers, and we will start the conversation. I hope you enjoy, and thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours,
Claudia.
Luis.
Thank you, Claudia. I will share my screen and so it is a pleasure to be here and present this lovely and expert speakers. I will introduce first Carla Santos. Carla is currently a researcher in Católica University of Portugal, and with a background in the microbiology. She is specialized in plant nutrition and molecular biology. She has a PhD in biotechnology, which has award with the Associazione Award of Best Doctoral Thesis in Agronomy by the multinational fertilizing company Fertiberia. In 2020, she founded the Legucon Consortium, which aims at building towards increasing legume production to support sustainable consumption patterns and climate change mitigation and implementation of more sustainable agriculture practices. Carla will give us insights about connecting the production sector with consumer needs to support sustainable diets. Following Carla, Fidel Toldra holds a PhD in chemistry and is currently a research professor and the head of Laboratory of Biochemistry, Innovation and Technology of Meat and Meat Products and at the Instituto Agroquímica and Tecnología de Alimentos. He serves as editor-chief of Trends in Food Science and Technology, one of the highest ranked journal in food area, and serves as editorial board of the other 16 scientific journals. He has published more than 300 research articles, more than 150 chapters of books, and edited more than 50 books. He is a distinguished AFT Fellow in 2009, and he's received many other international awards, including in 2015 DuPont Science Award, in 2019 Innovation Award of Spanish Meat Industry, and an award for advanced application of agriculture and food chemistry from Division of American Chemical Society. And at this year, 2023, an International Lectureship Award from American Meat Science Association. He has served more than 13 years in scientific panels on food additives, enzymes, and food contact materials for European Food Safety Authority. In 2008 and 9, he was in the group of FAO and WHO experts to evaluate chlorine-based disinfectants in processing foods. Today, Professor Fidel will talk about food bioactive peptides and its relevance in the healthy diet. Last but not least, Karl Wolfsgruber. He is an anthropologist and member of Italian National Professional Association of Anthropology, a freelancer journalist, marketing consultant, and author of content for radio, TV, and audiobooks. After his academic studies, he began his experience in research on the evolution of daily food and craft gestures in different countries around the world. And he has the opportunity to live with several months with some native peoples, from Maoris in New Zealand to nomadic peoples of Russian, Mongolian steppes, from South Saharan peoples to North American natives. From 2002 and 2018, he promoted and participated in numerous reforestation projects in Africa and Mongolia, fights against desertification in Chad and Libya, and protection of native peoples. He also active in the dissemination of healthier and sustainable lifestyles and food, with research on comparison of environmental impact of agri-food systems in collaboration of several universities and national and international organizations. He is invited to give lectures around the globe on different topics, including the Mediterranean diet, but also the impact of food in the environment, sustainable development of native peoples. But today we have the opportunity to know more about Mediterranean diets. So, following this biography of these experts, I hope you enjoy this session. So we'll start with ladies first. Carla, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So I will just share my screen with you and hope that now it is okay. Everything is fine, right?
Is it okay?
So, okay. First of all, I would like, of course, to thank to Food for Sustainability organization for this invite, and which I'm greatly proud of for being here amongst so memorable people. And I would like to start by telling you that I'm going to talk about the role of the production sector in supporting sustainable diets. And this is because for the last 2 years, I've been working on this consortium, on this project like UConn at a national level, which is focused on capacitating the production sector, farmers, talking to them, knowing their needs, and connecting them to the consumer. And this is because currently we have this concept of a sustainable diet that is being grownly ever more promoted amongst our populations. And what is the sustainable diet? It supports the consumption of food that is whole, unprocessed, that has a focus on environmental responsibility, namely by looking at all sections of the supply chain, which of course should protect our natural resources, our environment, our world, and also encompasses the waste problem that we currently have, given that our food production leads to the generation of 30% of waste, and consumption, food production and consumption results in 30% of food waste. So this is a big issue that the sustainable diet encompasses, and also, of course, the reduction in animal protein consumption. And this sustainable diet looks at these four pillars, and in diet, of course, that health is very important, sustainability, moderation, and diversity. And looking at these areas, many studies have raised a few questions, some food for thought that I wanted to share with you. So regarding health, these studies question if this reduction in animal protein intake can be realistically achieved, given cultural traditions, given the disparity between populations. Is this really a realistic objective to propose to our consumers? Also, this is a major point for a regular consumer. By changing the protein source, can we be facing new nutritional deficiencies or an aggravation in nutritional deficiencies? And also, of course, by reducing this animal protein intake, we are also going to drastically reduce saturated fat, which is good because saturated fat, of course, that has a negative impact in our cardiovascular health, for example. But by drastically reducing it, are we going to face any consequence of this? So these are some questions raised regarding health issues in adopting a sustainable diet. Also regarding diversity, of course, that we know that currently our world relies in only 3 major crops for calorie intake. And for example, we all eat the same banana variety in the whole world. So this impact in the lack of diversity that we are facing is putting at risk our food security, our nutritional security. And if we advise for a sustainable diet, for a patronized diet across the whole planet, are we continuing this pattern of standard foods and standard ingredients? How can we encompass diversity within the sustainable diet? Because of course that, for example, Mediterranean diet that will be talked about later on, it fits perfectly in this sustainable diet, but it's a regional, a local, a cultural associated diet. So how can this be extended to different parts of the world that maybe don't have access to this kind of foods? In terms of moderation, we are asking the consumers to reduce the intake portions, but this is okay from a developed country point of view. And usually the models that show the high consumption happening in the world, they oftentimes neglect looking at marginalized populations and unfavored populations in this kind of model. So are we masking the impact of these kind of diets? Are we extrapolating and overlooking this kind of populations and this kind of cultural traditions? So this is also a big issue, because we also have to have into account that some of these populations do not have access to this kind of food. And also, again, regarding sustainability, we know for a fact, for numerous questionnaires that have been done, that have been performed near the consumers, that sustainability has a price. And we need, as food technology, biotechnology, all of these disciplines need to work towards putting turning the sustainable diet more affordable. So linking sustainability, affordability, and also accessibility to the ingredients. So these are all some provoke thoughts to tease your imagination. So, but looking at the sustainable diet per se. So this diet is based mainly on the high consumption of this kind of food groups. And here in Catholic University, we have been very focused on legumes. We are working in several projects focused on them, looking at their nutritional characterization, looking at their impact to the soil, to the environment. And what we saw is that, in fact, legumes are more than protein. Currently, they are very fashionable because they are being used for protein isolates to produce those meat alternative food products. But in fact, they have numerous nutrients that are good for us. And although they have a bad side of them, causing some unwanted consequences for humans, they can easily be overcome by some techniques that we in fact already have for ancient years in our cultures. So legumes are very good for our health, not only because of the protein, but also because of their high content in fiber, carbohydrates, and vitamins. But also in this picture, I'm showing you all of different types of the so-called non-nutrients or anti-nutrients that have this bad connotation, because usually they have these kind of negative consequences, like reducing the iron absorption or increasing the risk of some kind of alterations in our gut functions. So these kind of non-nutrients that usually are unwanted, we have concluded that if they are present in small portions, maybe they can even lead to good health, and they can have an important role in our health. So we cannot look at this kind of nutrients as an isolate compound, but of course legumes are the agglomerate of all of these nutrients and non-nutrients, and that's why they are good for us. So looking at the consumer perspective, we asked the consumers what are the main drivers for consuming legumes. And although the legumes have these mixed feelings in consumption because of those unwanted consequences, but usually consumers in fact acknowledge the nutrition factor of consuming legumes, that they are good for us. However, as you can see here, sustainability is in the lowest part of the drivers for legumes consumption, and this gives us a hint on the adoption of a sustainable diet, because people are not that keen yet on adopting this kind of diets. And as you can see, in the second lead factor for consuming legumes is the price, because they are an affordable protein source. And looking at this, our question was, so how to reduce the price of sustainable food commodities in order to make them more attractive to the consumer. And amongst different factors, we focused on these two. So increasing the supply, local supply, and also education and training, not only for the consumer, but also for the production sector. And with this, we have currently these two projects ongoing, focusing on these leading factors. So one is the LeguCon project that I already mentioned, that is specifically focused on legumes and in connecting farmers to consumers, shortening the value chains. And we also have a very big focus on creating education program, education models, education material that can be accessible to these two major stakeholders. And the Radiant project, which is a European project, it focuses on underutilized crops, so not only on legumes, which are considered underutilized because they are still, their levels of production are still very low. And Radiant wants to create a dynamic value chain that encompasses all supply chain actors and helping them achieving a sustainable and a bioeconomy mentality. And of course, all of this also based in education and training for these stakeholders. For increasing local production, both these projects are focusing on making available a system of subsidies in order to motivate our producers to adopt these kind of crops in their fields. Because if we are only telling our production sector that they should produce legumes because they are good for the environment, well, that is not a big challenge for them. It's not that a big driver to adopt legumes in their fields. So we aimed at creating a model for supporting our farmers and helping them in the transition of, for example, a conventional mode of production to a more sustainable one that considers crop rotation, that considers the regeneration of the soils. So all of this with a technical backup that can help farmers to feel safe in making this kind of change in their field and then in their farm. Also, we also aim at creating this farmers capacitation model, not only through the financial support and the technical information, but also by helping them to connect to other supply chain actors. So we aim at showing them that the product has outflow, that there is a demand, a local demand for this kind of food commodities. So this is one of our major goals as well, is to connect the production sector to the different supply chains and ensuring the outflow of their production so they can feel safe in increasing even their production of this kind of crops. Regarding the consumer, what we aim at doing is engaging the consumer to a more sustainable point of view, a more sustainable kind of life that can include not only the buying directly to the farmer, but also in more conscious retailer shops, buying their legumes directly in fairs, in legume fairs, in local fairs, and also, of course, showing the benefits, the health benefit of adopting a sustainable diet in a sustainable kind of way. We are also very focused on looking at our future. So in Catholic University, we do a lot of actions with children, with teenagers, with students, school students, in order to promote this kind of food and this kind of diet. So in this way, we can build up this kind of consciousness about our planet and about adopting a sustainable diet. So these are our main points of action currently regarding the sustainable diet, regarding the production sector, and how we are working towards a more sustainable future. thank you very much for your attention. And any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carla, for this very clear presentation about sustainable diets and the perspective of and the importance of legumes. I don't know if the audience have some questions, Sylvia. Okay, we have one, two. Why does the sustainable diet needs to be unprocessed? Processing foods can extend their shelf life and improve their quality and safety.
Yes, so this problem regarding processed foods is really a big issue right now because, for example, here in Catholic University, we are promoting food biotechnology and the development of new foods with legumes, with processed legumes, like in flours and stuff like that, in order to make them more likable to the consumer, because some consumers simply don't like the flavor or the texture, and processing the legumes and making them in the form of, I don't know, energetic bars or flours that can be integrated in bread. Of course, that this makes this kind of products more accessible. However, when looking at unfavorable populations, sometimes these are not the kind of food product that is able for them to buy and to eat. So generally, the food by itself, the grains, are more accessible and also more affordable. So the processing also encompasses the price, the price context, right? And also there is a fear that by processing these kind of foods, we are adding stuff that it's not natural. So the consumer creates like a kind of antagonism to that.
Yeah. Maybe Karl, I will follow with this question because it seems very interesting. Do you think that the legumes are a way to go for a more sustainable planet? And also, what are your perspective to, since we are promoting the consumption of legumes, how we can avoid or being heavily dependent for imports of these legumes?
Of course. Okay, so for sure, legumes are one of the key answers. Okay, so there are a lot of them, and we need to look at this as an integrated approach. But legumes are one of the keys because they are good for the environment. They help to regenerate the soils. They are not dependent on high water input. They don't need fertilizer inputs. They don't need that much of herbicides and pesticides. So for sure, they are a way to go. And regarding my experience in LeguCon, what I can see that the major barrier for incorporating legumes in value chains are definitely our policies. And this is completely extendable to the rest of Europe. European Commission is indeed, in fact, supporting financial programs to find solutions to decrease our dependence in imports for legumes. But our current policies are not enough, and our farmers are always they have the fear of risking. Okay, so they need to feel safe. They need to be supported by these measures, these political measures, in order to support their inclusion of diets in the field.
Okay, several questions.
Definitely Europe is not self-sufficient in legume production. We rely in the import from Argentina, from Mexico. So we are definitely not self-sufficient, and that's a problem.
Okay, but we are working on that, and Carla I'm pretty sure that will push this production and training the farmers. Thank you so much for your presentation. Now we'll follow by Professor Fidel. Professor, yeah, the floor is yours. We have to move to a different topic, a different type of proteins, but I hope you enjoy.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I wish to thank you, the organizers of this event, for kind invitation to participate, especially Claudia, Costa, and also Luis Martins and Ana Rita. Thank you for your invitation. I'm very pleased to be here and to present this topic on what are the food bioactive peptides and which is their relevance for the diet. First of all, we should ask, what is a bioactive peptide? In general, these are small molecules that are composed of 3 to 20 amino acid residues. So they are composed of very few amount of amino acids. The question is that these peptides are inactive when they are part of the parent protein and are only active when they are released from the protein. This is caused by enzymes, proteolytic enzymes, that break down the protein in small pieces, small peptides, and when these peptides are smaller than 20 amino acids, they may have activity. So that we depend on the size of the peptide and also the sequence. I mean, which is the order of these peptides of these amino acids in the peptide, because depending on the sequence, the peptide can be active or not. This means that a peptide with the same content of amino acids may be active or not, depending on the order of these amino acids. And of course, these peptides must be able to reach the target site in the organism, so that they must be resistant to the gastrointestinal digestion and be able to cross the membrane in the intestinal membrane and reach the blood flow to reach the organs to exert the physiological benefit. There are many bioactive peptides. This is a kind of summary how many there are in the. This is a biopep database that is available in the website, and you can see here different activities. The most important or the most relevant, because many peptides have this activity, is what is called ACE inhibitory activity, that is related to the inhibition of an enzyme, which is the angiotensin converting enzyme, that is related to hypertension. So that if we can inhibit this enzyme, we can control hypertension and reduce the blood pressure. So these peptides are very important from this point of view. There are other peptides which have activity against oxidation. They are antioxidant peptides. There are other peptides with antibacterial properties. And then we have a wide range of peptides with different activities, not so abundant, but that may contribute to anti-inflammatory or hypoglycemic or opioid activities in the organism. So there are a wide range of peptides that may be present in the food and that may be exerting this bioactivity when they are consumed. Here are some examples of these activities that they can affect different systems in the organism, like gastrointestinal system. If we have peptides that are able to reduce the glycemic content and inhibit an enzyme that is related with diabetes mellitus, so they are called generically anti-diabetic peptides. Other peptides that are related to the cardiovascular system, as we have seen, most of the peptides have this antihypertensive activity, but also some of them may have also antithrombotic or hypocholesterolemic activity, and of course antioxidant, all of them related with the cardioprotective ability for the body, so that they have a benefit for the cardiovascular system. There are a few peptides that have some kind of immunomodulatory activity, so that they can contribute in some way to the immune system, but this is still very scarcely studied yet. And finally, some peptides that have what is called the opioid kind of activity that are affecting the nervous system, mainly as neuromodulators. These last two, immune system and nervous system, are less studied in the research, so that they need still a lot of research to demonstrate and validate the studies. The most important, as I said before, the most extensively studied are the antihypertensive bioactive peptides, because they are able to inhibit this enzyme, angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE, and this enzyme is related with the constriction of arteries and therefore is responsible to reduce the blood flow in the arteries and therefore increase the blood pressure. So that if we are able to inhibit this enzyme, we are reducing the blood pressure and then we are combating hypertension. But how can we get these peptides in the food? Why they are present in the food? You know that usually in food what we have is proteins, full proteins, and these proteins may be broken down by enzymes, which is called proteolytic enzymes. You can see here that we may have endogenous enzymes that are present in the food itself and can act during the ripening or aging of the food, but we can also have microbial enzymes coming from when these foods are fermented. In the case of cheese or fermented sausages or even wine, then the microorganisms present in this fermentation may have this kind of proteolytic enzymes and contribute to the breakdown of these proteins, generating peptides. So that we have these two routes: the endogenous enzymes route through the ripening and aging of the food, which is, for instance, the case of dry cured ham, or the other route with microbial fermentation and proteolytic enzymes from these microorganisms that contribute also to this generation of peptides. From both routes, we have at the end a lot of bioactive peptides of different size that can be present in the food and that can contribute to this bioactivity when we consume the food. Of course, the amount of bioactive peptides will depend especially on the processing time. When longer is the ripening time, more time have the enzymes to break down the protein so that more peptides will accumulate. Also the temperature, depending on is this mild or a little bit lower or higher. In general, higher temperatures contribute to higher enzyme activity and more peptide generated. The pH that may favor the activity of these enzymes, usually active around neutral pH, and the presence of any substances in the food that can activate or inhibit these enzymes. So that there is a variability, so that we cannot say strictly that a specific product like dry cured ham have a specific amount of peptides, because it depends quite a lot on the processing that this ham has got during the manufacture. The proteolysis is in general a very simple process where the food proteins on the left are long, big molecules, are broken down by peptidases, generating smaller peptides. Some of these peptides that are generated and are small can be bioactive and therefore contribute to health. This is a scheme of how these peptides, the general enzymes contributing to the generation of these small peptides. You can see that this is a biochemical mechanism which is a little bit long, because first we have these food proteins broken down by an endopeptidases that generate large fragments, and then other enzymes are generating the smaller fragments that contribute to bioactivity. You can see here that the small peptides in the middle, usually with the small sizes, contribute to bioactivity. And also very curious that this proteolysis phenomena is also contributing to the taste, to the good taste of these fermented and ripened products, because of the generation of a lot of free amino acids that contribute to taste. And some of these amino acids are also the substrate for volatile aroma compounds through chemical reactions, so that they are also contributing to aroma. So that this proteolysis in cheese or ham or sausages is important because it's contributing to the intense flavor, in general, intense taste and aroma of these products, in large part because of this generation of free amino acids and their aromatic compounds derived from them. You can see here a protein and how these endopeptidases break down the protein in large fragments, here in red, and then exopeptidases attack the fragments generated and generating smaller peptides, so that at the end we have accumulation of small peptides. These are some of the equipments that we have in the laboratory to control these peptides through liquid chromatography and identification of the peptides through liquid chromatography with mass spectrometry, so that we can identify which amino acids form part of these peptides, so that we can have the full sequence and know if they will be active or not. And here is an example of what is going on in a well-known product, especially in the Mediterranean area and also in Portugal with the presunto ham, which is dry cured ham, where it is well known because it's a very good contributor to high value biological value proteins with large amounts of essential free amino acids, many vitamins, especially group B, available M iron and trace elements, but has a problem that is the salt content. As you know, the ham contains large amounts of salt and is not advisable for people with hypertension because of this amount of salt. But in the last years, we discovered that the presence of large amounts of bioactive peptides with antihypertensive activity may contribute to reduce the bad contribution of salt and make it more accessible to these people with moderate hypertension. I will explain how. Usually, dry cure ham is a long process. You have here the full processing scheme, where there is a long time of ripening and drying, where the endogenous enzymes present in the muscle are working, are breaking down the proteins and generating peptides. Of course, when longer is the process of this manufacture of dry cure ham, more intense is the proteolysis and more bioactive peptides will be generated. So that dry cure ham with 12 or 18 months of processing will have more bioactive peptides than a dry cure ham produced in only 6 months. So longer time, more amount of bioactive peptides. And this is how these peptides are reach the consumer. And these peptides are submitted to gastrointestinal digestion, where the peptidases in the stomach and intestine contribute also to hydrolyze these peptides in some of them and generate even smaller bioactive peptides that can be transported through the intestinal membrane and reach the bloodstream and exert the physiological effects. This means that some peptides can be ingested and remain intact and reach the blood intact, and other peptides can be degraded during digestion to smaller fragments. Some of them may be active, some of them may be inactive, so that we don't have guarantees sometimes if we don't test the resistance of these peptides to the digestion. But if they reach intact to the intestine and to the blood, then we have a good physiological effect for the health. This is what we do in the laboratory to characterize the peptides from the food, or in this case from the ham. We extract them and then we separate through preliminary techniques like chromatography. Then we do in vitro tests to check which fractions contain this bioactivity, and then we perform a second separation to identify which peptides may be the responsible for this, and then we identify them with mass spectrometry to characterize these peptides. And then once we have the sequence of this peptide, which amino acids are in the sequence of this small peptide, we can synthesize this peptide to check in vivo the activity and verify if it is bioactive or not in vivo. This is an example. This is a peptide with 5 amino acids in this order. It is bioactive and in vitro and also in vivo. And here you have an example with rats. When this peptide is administered to the rats, there is a drop in the blood pressure, the systolic blood pressure. You can see here about 25 millimeters of mercury after 8 hours of administration. This means that this peptide contributes to reduce the blood pressure, so that it is considered an antihypertensive peptide. And this is one of the peptides that is found in dry cure ham. And you can see that the effect is quite prolonged because it starts about 4 hours after ingestion, and even after 1 day, 24 hours, there is still some reduction in the blood pressure. This is just an example of how a peptide can exert this in vivo activity after consumption. And we did also, in collaboration with the Catholic University of Murcia, an assay with humans, in this case 80 volunteers, consuming an amount, about 80 grams of dry cure ham every day, that was produced in collaboration with an important dry cure company. We optimized the processing technology to reach a good amount of bioactive peptides. And then in this study with humans, we use as placebo cooked ham that did not contain these bioactive peptides because it's just a cooked product with no ripening or aging, so that there is no accumulation of bioactive peptides. And this is the reason that was used as a placebo. In this assay, we could check after 1 month of consumption that there was a trend to a reduction in different biochemical parameters in the blood, like LDL cholesterol, triacylglycerols, and basal cholesterol, and even basal glucose. So that there was a trend towards reduction in the consumers that consume dry cured ham in comparison to those that consume cooked ham. This was also observed with the blood pressure, that there was a reduction in the mean blood pressure in the consumers of dry cured ham in relation to cooked ham. This was more significant from the statistical point of view. It was especially the systolic blood pressure was significantly reduced when consuming dry cured ham in comparison to cooked ham. So that this slight decrease was observed in systolic and diastolic blood pressure, and also the total cholesterol levels were decreased after 1 month, in these cases with a statistical significance. For other parameters, there was a trend, but not significantly different, so that we could not confirm the activity against glucose or other parameters. But it indicates that in some way, it is important that in general, when you consume dry cured ham, you can expect an increase in blood pressure due to the amount of salt. But in this case, you did not get this increase in blood pressure, but on the reverse, you even got a slight decrease in blood pressure. So that this is an important fact that in some way these bioactive peptides are counteracting the bad effect of salt. This is the general scheme for these food proteins, how they are generating bioactive peptides. And here in the bottom in green, the important questions that I mentioned before, this gastrointestinal digestion, that we must be sure that these peptides will be resistant to the enzymes in the digestive tract to reach intact to the intestine and be absorbed and reach the blood stream to reach the organs. So that it's important that these peptides are resistant to the gastrointestinal digestion. And this is a way that we can also produce these bioactive peptides outside the food. It means that we can collect food proteins from food waste, for instance, and then hydrolyze them in reactors with proteolytic enzymes to produce these bioactive peptides from the industrial point of view in large amounts. So that this hydrolysis is taken in reactors for a few hours, and then we collect the hydrolysate and separate the bioactive peptides from other larger peptides or free amino acids. And then we may have enriched extracts of bioactive peptides that from this protein hydrolysis can significant added value product that we can obtain from a byproduct, food byproduct, so that we are giving also added value and in some way improve sustainability to several food processes where there are waste rich in proteins, so that we can in some way improve the circular economy for these processes. So these are examples that we have as a food supplements, especially from collagen, hydrolyzed collagen, and as extracts that can have different benefits for health that are available in Spain, in Europe in general, and Asian countries, etc. They are expanding because they have different properties and different benefits for health. And concluding, we can say that the endogenous and microbial peptidases can generate a lot of bioactive peptides during food processing, and this is very important because we can reach foods with health relevance that are significant, in this case for consumers. This is especially significant in long ripened foods and fermented foods with long aging, because this amount of bioactive peptides will have important benefits for health, but we have to take into account that gastrointestinal digestion is considered, and that we are sure that these peptides will be resistant to the digestion. We know that there are thousands of peptides generated in this protein hydrolysis, and even during gastrointestinal digestion. Some of them have been identified, characterized, and some of them, of course, have bioactivity that has been identified, but there still remain a lot of peptides that we don't know still their effect, but we are sure that more bioactive peptides will be found in the near future. And especially these bioactive peptides generated from food proteins during processing or after collected from food waste can exert good antioxidant, antihypertensive, anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, and hypocholesterolemic activity. But of course, more clinical trials will be done in the future so that we will learn more and we will have more information about them and how they can benefit consumers during eating this type of foods. And these are some of the projects involved in this research. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you have questions, Sylvia, from the audience. We have one of them. Are you aware, Professor? Are you aware of any integrated approach to extract bioactive peptides from meat co-products?
Yes, this is a good question, and in fact, we have several projects running in our laboratory to get these bioactive peptides from different types of meat co-products. We are studying from liver, kidney, stomach, heart, also from blood, so that we are doing a lot of research on this aspect because we are committed to this sustainability process to get improved benefits from in this case from the meat waste. Meat is very rich in protein, so that is a very important substrate to produce bioactive peptides.
Okay, I would like to know, because you mentioned in the presentation and also in the research work that the peptidases from lactic acid bacteria, yeasts, and molds may be helpful in generating bioactive peptides.
Yes.
And my question is, if we use similar peptidases from different microorganisms, for example, the processed food will be different, because the taste is very important for the consumers. And can we modulate the flavor using different peptidases from different organisms?
Yes, this is very important. We work in the past a lot in the flavor development, in this case in meat products, and it's very important the type of microorganism that you use for fermentation, because each microorganism has a full range of enzymes, not only proteases but also lipases and other enzymes, and depending on the proportions and type of enzyme, they can generate more or less peptides, but also fatty acids, volatile compounds, all of them affecting taste and aroma. So that it is very important, and in fact, the companies are very careful with the microorganisms that are using for fermentation, because of the particular properties of each microorganism.
Okay, the NOS Q&A is is reaching some more questions. Can these peptides can be extracted and used in other in food products, for example, in legumes?
Yeah, well, yes, you can use. In fact, it's a very simple process. You may have proteins from any origin, from any vegetable, animal, type of food, and then you can extract proteins and hydrolyze them, and you can get bioactive peptides. And once you have this extract, you can incorporate this extract of peptides wherever you want. It can be incorporated in any other food or used as a food supplement as such.
Just one more question from the audience. This specific one that is very interesting. Have you done clinical studies on bioactive peptides on humans? Yeah, the answer is yes. We demonstrated. Can you comment the economic viability of synthetical production of bioactive peptides?
Well, this is something that, from the point of view of economy, is not so easy. I mean, it's cheaper to hydrolyze them with enzymes, commercial enzymes, or microorganisms. Fermentation is more cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
We can use synthesis from a laboratory point of view. We use it to produce small amounts of peptide because we need them for research. But to produce from an industrial point of view is more expensive, unfortunately.
Of course, Yuri. Thank you so much, Professor. Maybe we'll move to the next speaker. Karl, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So,
yeah, it's perfect.
I'd like to thank the Academy for your invitation, all the participants. I thank the Professor Carla and Fidel for their interesting presentations. I apologize for my very bad English, as usual, and my presentation would be a little bit much more simple, as I can say. So, the Mediterranean diet is not a diet. Everyone talks about the Mediterranean diet generally, but very few people actually know what really it is or follow it correctly. And in this speech, I will therefore try to answer to these two questions. What is the Mediterranean diet, and does the Mediterranean diet still exist, since very few people put it into practice? So, what is the Mediterranean diet? The Mediterranean diet is a cultural model. It's not a diet, it's a body of knowledge or a way of life, and consequently also a style of eating, handed down for centuries by the peoples bordering the Mediterranean Sea. Because geography, as we know, is the mother of history, and the Mediterranean area is the mother of the Mediterranean diet history. If we are here talking about sustainable diet, is because we live in an unsustainable urban society. The geography changed into a same geographical, I can say, way of living. Urban societies, Milan is the same of Barcelona, is the same of Paris, is the same of Frankfurt, in most of the environment way of living. So that's why we are talking about this kind of issues. We are talking about the sustainable or unsustainable way of living or way of eating. Knowledge. This cultural model is an expression, of course, of the peasant civilization that was self-sufficient, and we can say today eco-sustainable, and social and cultural, and it was a social and cultural system based primarily on respect, gratitude, protection, and deep knowledge of natural and rural biodiversity. Physical activity. This cultural model was characterized by regular daily physical activity and frequent exercise. In other words, varied, harmonious, fruitful, and with frequent exercise according to season, gender, age, activity performed, context, physical condition, etc. Nutrition. Mediterranean diet, the Mediterranean dietary pattern is distinguished by quality, quantity, proportions, way of cooking, time management. Quality. Local food, in season, self-produced from local and unselected plants or seeds, and eaten whole, so roots, stem, leaf as well, or with the peel. We think about fruit, for example, and fresh or preserved naturally, with oil, with salt, with vinegar, with honey, with spices, in brine, under earth, or under ash, or under sand, under snow, or under ice or by drying, smoking, roasting, a very, very, very complex way of preserve food. Quantity, daily vegetable foods in good amount by variety and type, vegetables and wild vegetables both from land or sea, for example, seaweeds. Whole grain cereals, barley, wheat, spelt, millet, oats, or rice. Whole grain or semi-integral pasta, bread or flours. Pulses or legumes, thousands of varieties. Aromatic herbs, olive oil, that is a fruit oil, or seeds oil, for example, sesame oil, as the main source of fat. Wine, generally adult men only, in very moderate amounts. Quantity, once a week. Raw or roasted seeds, sunflowers, sesame, pumpkins, etc. Dried fruits, walnuts, almonds, hazelnuts. Wild or cultivated fruits, raw or cooked. Herbal teas. Eggs from free-range animals, shellfish, snail, white meat from water, example fish, from land, example wild rabbit, or sky, example birds. Cheese, fresh or aged, cured, from milk of grazing animals, mainly goat, sheep, and very really rarely cattle. And fermented food, like yogurt, garum, fermented vegetables, etc. Once or twice a month. Red meat, often cured, or in sausage form, not in the way that we generally consumed, especially. Once or twice a year, traditional sweets with unrefined sweeteners, for example, during folk festivals or special family events. Proportion, 60% of carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates from cereals, starches, for example, 25-30% of fats, mainly polyunsaturated, omega-3 or omega-6, 10% or 50% of protein, mainly from vegetable. So now, another characteristic is the way of cooking that is changed by cooking source, fire from wood, embers, hot stone, sun, or cooking temperature, generally low, or cooking time from shorter to longer, generally shorter. Time of cooking, boiling, baking, on stone, in cooking pot, covered, marinating, frying, or over embers, etc. And type of materials used for cooking, like stone, glass, wood, copper, terracotta, etc. Time management. All activities took place from sunrise until sunset, and therefore according to season. The main meal was lunch, more plentiful and varied. Dinner was more sober and simple. People generally ate from 2 and at most 3 times a day. Mediterranean diet and nutrients. Macronutrients, carbohydrates, of nutrients, macro and micro, contained in foods corresponding to these dietary habits are macronutrients, carbohydrates, low in glycemic content, rich in fiber and complex sugars, protein, low in quantity and mainly of plant origin, fats, mainly polyunsaturated, like omega-3 or omega-6, fiber of plant origin, whole grains, vegetables, legumes, fruits, consist mainly of polysaccharides, appunto macronutrients, cellulosa, lignin, pectins, mucilage, etc. Water of good quality, raw or boiled, like with herbal teas and so on. Macronutrients, vitamins, all, both water and fat soluble, and many minerals, of course. Mediterranean diet and the 9 essential amino acids. The foods in which these and other amino acids are most present are those of animal origin, of course. But as we know, they are also highest in fats, and therefore, we know very well this today, must be consumed in moderation. And but grains, legumes, and vegetables each also contain different types of essential amino acids. And the Mediterranean diet is known for its dishes that incorporate grains, legumes, and vegetables, a combination that constitutes a well-balanced protein complex capable of covering essential amino acid requirements. For example, fresh whole grain pasta with vegetables and beans are very common in the Mediterranean area, like minestrone and whole grain and bean soups and so on. So, Mediterranean diet and the 9 essential amino acids contained, of course. So, protein from various plant foods consumed throughout the day can provide a sufficient supply of the essential amino acids. And it was the official position of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Legumes, often referred to as the poor man's meat, have, however, more advantages of the rich man's meat: slow absorption carbohydrates, a good protein quota, minerals, some vitamins, and dietary fibers that are really essential and very important. Some examples of balanced dishes, for example, throughout the Mediterranean area, we find always soups or cereals with pulses and vegetables. Some typical dishes, one course meals, un piatto misto unico of the Mediterranean regions. We find in Egypt the kosheri, rice, pasta, legumes, and vegetables together. Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, couscous with vegetables, beans, or fish. Spain, we have paella, rice, vegetables with beans or fish. France, we have socca. Of course, south of France, we are talking about the regions on the seaside, on the Mediterranean seaside. Chickpeas and vegetables, ratatouille, rice, vegetables, pulses, or fish. Sicily, we have arancini, based on rice, peas, vegetables, cheese, and sometimes some meat. Cyprus, we have cowpepia, rice, vegetables, white meat. Sardinia, pasta and bottarga, pasta with fish, eggs, and vegetables. Barley and beans is a very common dish in Sardinia. Campania, we have migliaccio. It's a sweet made with millet, eggs, and lemon. Just a few pictures of this. So, the Mediterranean diet is gradually disappearing, especially in the Mediterranean countries. And this is a very big problem, because the new generation doesn't really know what really the Mediterranean diet is. And because the food choices today are connected to what the market offers, advertising, so new needs, or the lowest price. The Mediterranean diet is becoming a memory for adults and will become a history chapter for our children. And this is a very, very big problem. So, high caloric intake without adequate energy expenditure, because lifestyles have also become more sedentary. This is another problem. Apparent prosperity. We live, therefore, in an age of apparent prosperity, because the current presence of people over 80 is also due in large part to the benefits of the more balanced and sober lifestyles and diets they followed when they were young. The new generations, the sons and the daughters of prosperity, are educated in unhealthy lifestyles, with unhealthy lifestyles and diet, and raised in unhealthy environments. So, and unfortunately, already they manifest many health problems, both physical and mental. To improve the future of our children, of course, the Mediterranean cultural food model must be rediscovered, revaluated, and disseminated. And especially starting at our home tables. So that generates demand for much more demand for local, seasonal, fresh, and chemical-free foods. This will generate, of course, a bigger supply of better food. That means much more local food, seasonal, fresh, and chemical-free foods. Benefits, that means that are for our sons, our health, and our environment. The Mediterranean cultural food model was healthier and sustainable. As we know, and I told you, the geography is the mother of history, and the nature is the mother of human beings, and is the mother of beans, is the mother of rice, and so we have to improve, of course, nature in general by reforestation and so on, and by cultivate in a very much more better way and the traditional way crops. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Karl. Very interesting, another interesting presentation. Can have a look for the Q&A. Well, I will make the first. What can we do as a consumers to bring back Mediterranean diet? Very interesting question.
Actually, I think that first of all we have to understand why. Okay, why we have to bring back to the Mediterranean model pattern diet and so on. Because the question is, who are sicker, the urbanized peoples or the native people? Who are sicker, the people who follow a modern diet or people who follow a much more traditional diet? So what can we do as consumers? First of all, try really to find the time and the way to study, to know, to read much more about what really was the Mediterranean cultural model and so on, and diet. That's the first thing, is because if you know, you can make your choice. If you don't know, it's much more difficult, because without knowing anything, without having any medical information, you have to know that the Mediterranean cultural model, Mediterranean diet, okay, we can call it, we can still call Mediterranean diet. We are talking about a successful cultural model used for centuries. So that means that for centuries we didn't we hadn't the need to have the diabetologist, the psychologist, and so on. You know, when we are talking about the Mediterranean diet, we are talking about a very successful cultural model, very successful. It worked for centuries. So now we have to understand how to be back. What can we do? But all the things that Professor Fidel and Professor Carla said are going in different ways into this direction. This is a medical, a chemical, is a scientific, a cultural direction. But because we are talking about a very successful scientific, cultural, nutritional model.
Okay.
So study. You have to study. We have to try to be much more informed.
Of course, yeah, right. So in the line with this statement, do you think that the technology can assist the Mediterranean diet to continue to claim its merits, its benefits? The technology.
Allora, the technology. If we use technology to measure how the traditional way of cultivating, the traditional is working better than other modern way of cultivating, but that can give to the small farmers much more effort, because they can measure their much more quality. Can you imagine a label on a product that say these products don't use to be product use only 2 kilos of anidride carbonica, for example, or just use 1 liter of water, or so on. If we use technology to support the really traditional farmers, that maybe they are not able to write or to read, but if we can, with humble, go and work with them, helping them to demonstrate, to show that what they are really doing for centuries is much more sustainable, and it costs less, it's much more healthier, and so on. We have to really to protect this kind of culture when we find it, and with the technology measure what they are really doing better than our modern, I can say, systems. I don't know if, because my English is very, I can say...
No, it's very clear. No,
really?
The idea is completely clear.
Okay.
No, it's very, very clear. And just a final question for you, Karl. Do you think that we are in a transitional period between, and we have to assume a new model of Mediterranean diet or Mediterranean cultural food model? Do you think we are in the transition period or not?
Actually, allora, people, human beings change when they need it.
Yeah.
Now, today, the demand of health is increased, is even higher, because urban system is not working, is unsustainable. We are talking about thousands of webinars of sustainability, because our model is unsustainable. So the demand, so people change when they need to change. Of course, we change work if we need much more money, and so on and so on. So because the health of the people is getting worse and worse, who solves health problems? Medicine, yes, of course, sometimes, but not really in a very complex way. In United States, the second reason, the second, come dice, reason to death, the people die, the second come si dice, motivo in inglese. The second, okay, people die much more for the medicine that should be the solution than other pathologies. Cioè, medicine are becoming a problem, because much more, come si chiamano, gli antibiotici, and we are becoming weaker because of the solution, cioè the medicine. So people in this situation, in this moment, are looking for
solutions. Yeah,
looking for
completely.
And if we reflect and we can have we go to holiday in Sicily, we go to holiday in Portugal, we go to holiday in countryside, we remember ourselves that there are solutions different by the solution that generally the mainstream are offering.
Of course.
So that's why we are in a transition, because our system is failing. Is
adapting, exactly.
Is adapting to the question of need. We need to change, but not so many people understand which is the best way to change. In Italy, for example, I don't know, in Portugal, lots of young people are coming back to countryside to understand what they have to do, because they don't know anything. Yeah. And so they try to connect with old people and try to recover a centuries culture that is disappearing. That everybody thought that it was, yes, we know, but we know what? Because Mediterranean culture, like German culture, like all the real ancient traditional culture, are strong because they really understand what to do in this exactly moment. If it's rain, I can do that. If it's windy, I have to do that. If I'm sick, I have to eat this. If I'm pregnant, I have to eat this, but not this. It's very complex. Complex.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Karl. Just a final question for all, and you can round this question, more high level question. From your perspective, what is the role of the alternative proteins are playing on the healthier diets? And maybe we are towards too clean proteins or higher tech engineering proteins. Maybe you can move to Carla first. What is your opinion?
Okay, so my opinion on that is that indeed we will have a lot of alternatives in the future. Meat created in the lab, which is becoming ever more a trend, and of course the alternative meat protein sources like insects and stuff like that. But I think that tradition and culture will wait a lot on these decisions from the consumers, and we cannot erase thousands of years of cultural options and food options. So we cannot expect that suddenly we are all starting to eat those alternative meat. So I think that it's a process and that it might take place in the future, but it will require balance and much more information, for sure, like Professor Karl was saying.
Yeah. And Professor Fidel, what's your opinion about these alternative proteins?
Well, I think that they will be growing, of course, because there is a demand from the consumers for these alternatives, not to meat and fish. But of course, we have to be careful because sometimes, for instance, the culture meat is very attractive because you can produce meat without contributing to CO2, things like that. But to make this kind of new meat attractive to consumer, you have to add flavor, aroma, color, taste, a lot of things to the meat to make it attractive. And all of these additions also are consuming CO2, so that this is not so sustainable. So we have to balance what is at the end the final result. But of course, these alternative proteins from vegetable origin or from insects are playing and will play quite a lot of role in the future. Especially the proteins from insects have 50% is essential amino acids, so that is a very, very nutritive proteins, so that they will have a role. Of course, most of us will eat them not as an insect, but as an ingredient in a food, so that we will not be aware that there are insects in our food.
Yeah, completely. Yes, we agree, totally agree. And Karl, your opinion?
Actually, we are 8 billion. As you know, we are 8 billions. And while traditional cultures respect the natural selection, a woman have 10 children, one die, say, I'm sorry, but she still live for the other 9. Do you understand? Now, people in this, we stopped. We try to control and the natural selection. That was the biggest mistake, of course. Maybe, and we are 8 billions, so the population, of course, right? So that was I'm not against the evolution of the modernity. Do you understand? I'm just trying to say that we are 8 billion, so we have different level of way of thinking solution. We are in a capitalistic system, so they want to make money and they try to find a way to try to convince other people to use this kind of system or another system. The question is that is a cultural fight today. We are living in a cultural system and fight against this kind of big way of thinking solutions, because science is very good, because university, research, webinars, it's very good that we are talking about these kind of things. But while we are talking about, there are another level that thinks only about how to sell meat to everybody, or sugar, or some other things, because the same corporation that produce meat produce medicine or produce something like that. Sorry, because I have to, come dire, if we are, of course, the question is very clever, but my answer should be as an anthropologist. I have to say what I really think about this. If we consider that we are 8 billions, of course, I understand that we have to find out a way to make pills with good proteins or not proteins and so on, because in Tokyo there are 30 million of people. So they have tried to, so it's better that they give them some pills of natural proteins and vegetables, things that not preservatives or something like very chemical, understand.
Yeah.
But if we have to say, okay, this is the world today, but tomorrow we have to change the system. We have to change some rules. And sorry.
Of course, yeah, it's very challenging, as you mentioned, to feed 8 billion people. Yeah, it's quite challenging.
Sorry, just the last thing, because Carla. A very important point issue in the Carla speech was that how can we bring people to let them consume much more good proteins like beans and so on. And we are animals, and since we are children, we learn much more by watching what adults do, and not by hearing and remembering what the adults are saying to us. So I try during this year, it's many years that I'm trying to stimulate my colleagues at the university and so on and so on, not only to write books and books and books and books and books, but to build a spin-off of university, farmhouses, so on, because students also, they have to try to manage, to cultivate, to do this, to taste, to cook, to clean dishes after eating, and so on.
Yeah, of course. And Food for Sustainability is trying to build this these lighthouse farms and identify how we can push and you can change the ideas for a more regenerative ways, like the regenerative agriculture. We're trying to push this kind of ideas and motivate the people with different projects to engage in the sustainability of the food system, but also the others. Thank you so much, Carla, Professor Fidel, and Karl, for your presentations, and I'm very pleased to be a moderator of your session. Of this session, I will pass to Claudia Costa. Thank you so much.
Grazie.
Thank you, Luis. Just one final word, and also to thank all the speakers and all the audience. I think we can take something back from this great presentations, if not really fully relating to the work that we are doing, that hopefully some you can relate and move on with your project, but also as consumers, from Karl to what can we do to make sure that the Mediterranean diet does not disappear. This is a challenge. How can we start to integrate more legumes and buy more locally, so that we are not so dependent on the big conglomerates from Europe and from Fidel, very interesting. This is a little bit more fundamental research, but with the example of a product that is typically Mediterranean, how these typical products can also be beneficial. So I hope you have enjoyed. Let me once again thank you, and just a small reminder that we will continue discussing sustainable proteins. Next week we'll be trying to understand who's doing what on alternative proteins. This time we will have companies that are actually producing insects. And Fidel, I'm very pleased you said, well, we're not going to eat insects, we'll just be an ingredient, because for me it's very difficult. So companies that are already working on cultured meats, and also try to understand how we can take the most from beer residues to produce protein. So I hope you like it. I see Teresa here on the screen, so I also have to say, don't forget to eat feijoada and rojões. Karl, you haven't mentioned the Portuguese dishes, but they are also, very balanced in terms of the Mediterranean diet. It was a pleasure to have you here, Hope you have enjoyed, and see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you. Bye.
Grazie.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.